We'd like to welcome everyone out to our Fireside this evening. My name is Michael Blocker. I'm the co-chair of Utah County Single Adults. I'll be conducting, and Lorraine will be announcing, my co-chair will be announcing the speakers. We have a lot of great announcements coming up. So our second Sunday Fireside in May will not happen because it's Mother's Day, so there'll be no Fireside on the second Sunday in May. We have our dance the first Friday in Orem, and then we have our June conference coming up, which is going to be awesome, and we have some special announcements on that. The cost of the meals and the dances are going to be $5 each for all of them. So it'll only be $5 per meal, $5 for the dances on Friday and Saturday. Attending the conference, there's no cost for that. But if you want to ensure that you have a meal, that you'll probably need to pay before Thursday evening so that we have a count on how many meals to order. So, and we're also going to have flyers like this posted. They're not printed to hand out, and you can take a picture of it with your phone so that you have a conference schedule. We got a number of great speakers here over the weeks. Tim and Tyler from Scripture Central, and a number of other excellent speakers for our June conference. And that'll be June 20th to the 25th. Our opening hymn is hymn number 223. 223, I can't read the writing. Our opening prayer will, have you done your good world today? Our opening prayer will be by David Whiting, and then we'll go from there.
Dear Father in heaven, we're so grateful to be gathered together as saints and singles, to listen to our speaker that has prepared his words, and to draw closer to Thee, and to build and renew friendships. We ask Thee that Thou be mindful of those with challenges and struggles, that their burdens will be lighter and lifted. Please bless our families throughout the world. We're grateful for this gospel that Thou hast given us. And please help us to have the courage and the strength to reach out and help others. And these things we say in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, David, for the prayer. For those, we had a lot of people walk in after Michael sat down, and we just wanted to let you know that we have posted up somewhere in the back, I'm thinking. We will have it posted, our conference schedule, which is June 20th to the 25th. And our opening speaker for that conference will be Thursday night, and that will be Sharon Eubank. So it should be we're hoping and praying it's going to be wonderful. I am excited to introduce my friend, EksAyn. We've been friends for a couple months. And have been talking. I went to a class he was doing and then made a beeline to ask him if he would speak to us. EksAyn is a believer in Jesus Christ. Less importantly, EksAyn has been seen on Forbes.com and Speaker Magazine. In addition to various blogs, podcasts, and news locations, his books, The Key to the Gate and What I Want My Children to Know Before I Die, have sold internationally. And much more importantly, he is somewhat good at playing hide and seek, jumping on a trampoline, and at setting up a tent trailer when taking his family on road trips. He also enjoys hiking, mountains, camping, reading, and learning about Jesus Christ. EksAyn is passionate about inspiring others to improve their relationships and ability to influence others in a positive way. EksAyn. Brother Anderson, sorry.
My name is EksAyn Anderson, and that is actually my name. I'm going to spell it here on the board because nobody can say it or spell it. You spell E-K-S, that's a capital A, right in the middle of my name. They say it's Swedish. I got to tell you that I have been to Sweden, and there is not a single person in Sweden named EksAyn, not one. My wife calls me X. I don't know if that's a good thing if your wife calls you X. I'm my wife's X, and we're married. You know, when I was growing up, I heard a few different things about my name. You know, gas X, X slacks. You know, EksAyn sounds a lot like insane, so I heard occasionally insane EksAyn. But every once in a while, I'd get a good one. Sexy Exy was my favorite. Didn't happen very often, but occasionally I got that. And I was grateful for those moments. You know, today we have a few things to talk about, so we'll get right into it. When I was young, I used to like to draw trees, and this is how I draw them. Get to the end of the tree here. Now, I don't have enough room on the board here, but what I do is I draw every tree and every twig. I even draw the veins in the leaves. So if you can imagine a tree with dozens of leaves on it like this. I went to school and I saw how the other children drew trees, and guess how they drew them? Any ideas? I see a few people hand motioning to me. The poof and the stick, thank you, yes. It was something like this, two lines like this and a poofy cloud on top. When I saw how the other children drew trees, I stopped drawing them the way I used to, and I started drawing them the way the other children drew them. And I found out much later that when my mom saw this, she cried. She really cried. Well, fast forward a few years, I was playing Little League, and there's a few different ways you can play Little League. You can either be good and actually hit the ball, or if you were pathetic like I was, you just hold the bat out like this, and the ball would hit the bat and drop. It's called a bunt. I had one bunt the entire season as an 8-year-old boy. I was pathetic. But I'm not here to tell you how pathetic I was. There was something significant that happened after this game. We went home and my mom complained of a very severe headache. And this was not normal for her. She did not get headaches very often. And it got so bad that my dad decided he was going to take Mom to the hospital. And I remember standing there in the front room of our home, and I gave my mom a hug, and I said, "I love you." And then they drove away. Well, I was a little bit anxious. I was 8 years old. This had never happened before, and I went to my uncle and aunt who happened to be staying with us at the time, and I went to one of them and I said, "Is my mom going to die?" And my uncle said, "No, she's not going to die. She probably just has a migraine." And I said, "Do you promise my mom's not going to die?" And he said, "I promise. She's not going to die. Just relax. It's going to be okay." And I wanted to believe him. It was getting late, and I went downstairs, I climbed up on my bunk bed, and I started reading a book about squirrels. I still remember the book. Well, I read, and I read, and I waited for my parents to get home, and they didn't get home. And I waited. I probably stayed up till about 2 or 3 in the morning, probably before I fell asleep. The next morning I woke up and I was a little bit anxious. I wanted to see my mom and dad, and so I climbed off my bunk bed and I walked out. I was in this basement, and there was this door to my room. And on the other side of this door was kind of a long family room. But I opened the door to my room and I looked out on this long family room, and I could see my dad on the other side of the family room. But something was different. My mom was not there. Instead, there was a friend and a neighbor and another friend and another neighbor and another neighbor and another neighbor. It seemed like half the neighborhood was at our home. And as I walked closer, I could see that my dad had been crying. He had tears on his cheeks. His cheeks were wet with tears. And as I got even closer, my dad was trying not to cry. And he was choking back the tears. And he wasn't doing a very good job, frankly. But he said words I'll never forget. He said, through his tears, "I think our mom is going to leave us." And I put 2 and 2 together, and I went into a panic, and I said, Dad, we got to do something. We got to do something. What can we do? We got to say a prayer. We got to do something. What can we do to help Mom? What had happened is my mom had suffered a cerebral hemorrhage, which means a blood vessel in her brain had burst, and she was now brain dead at the hospital, being kept alive by a life support system. A couple of days later, I remember being at the hospital. I walked in, I saw my mom on the hospital bed. She had tubes coming out of her nose. She couldn't breathe on her own because she was brain dead, and so she had a machine that would breathe for her. And her chest would kind of rise like this, stop, and then it would go up and down. And it seemed so unnatural to me as an 8-year-old boy. There was nothing they could do. So eventually they had to take my mom off of the life support system, and I remember when they did. My mom kind of crinkled up and she turned bluish. And I wanted to give her a kiss, but I was afraid to because she didn't look like my mom. And so I went and faked one. I went and kissed the air about an inch or two from her face, and I walked out. My mom died that day, and as an 8-year-old boy, I watched my mom die. That's the way I felt too, just so you know. I got to tell you, there was a friend of the family who was an anesthesiologist who was there. I found out later, he said, you know what, X, after you left the room, your mom, without any help from anyone else, she went from being crinkled up and bluish to where she opened her, kind of spread out her arms, almost like she was coming into a beautiful place. Now here's my question for you. How do you think that I draw trees now? You see that? I saw someone point. Thank you. Tell me your name. Nancy was pointing. Thank you, Nancy. You're correct, Nancy. I draw them the way my mom would want me to, the way I see them. And I got to tell you, I haven't given my mom a hug for over 3 decades since that day she drove away. But there's something that's almost as good as giving your mom a hug, and it's feeling her influence. And I feel her influence all the time. In fact, I got to tell you right now, in this very moment, right here, right now, figuratively, I'm drawing trees the way I see them by sharing my heart with you in this very moment. Thanks, Mom. Now I gotta ask you a question. Why is there so much pain in the world? Why does God allow immense amounts of pain in the world? I'll tell you, it wasn't just me who suffered. You know, my dad had 7 children. My youngest brother was 7 weeks old. He was still breastfeeding. Why does that happen? Any ideas? Yes. So we learned to turn to him. Tell me your name. Erica said, so we learned to turn to him. Is that correct? Thank you. I like that. Thank you, Erica. You know, I like that a lot. I brought something here that I wanted to read. I'm a huge C.S. Lewis fan, and one of the reasons I like C.S. Lewis, he used to be an atheist. He literally did not believe in God. And he went to Oxford, which is like the Harvard of England, and he could explain why he believed in God to a lot of people in ways that nobody else could. Let me just quote from something he said. He said, "That is why we must not be surprised if we are in a rough time." Now I'm gonna skip down. He said, "Imagine yourself as a living house. God comes in to rebuild that house. At first, perhaps you can understand what he's doing. He's getting the drains right and stopping the leaks in the roof and so on. You knew those jobs needed doing, and so you were not surprised. But presently, he starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts abominably." Did you hear that? It hurts abominably and does not seem to make sense. I want that to sink in. It doesn't make sense. What on earth is he up to? The explanation is that he is building quite a different house from the one you thought of. throwing out a new wing here, putting on an extra floor there, running up towers, making courtyards. You thought you were going to be made into a decent little cottage, but he is building a palace. He intends to come and live it in himself. I want to ask you, one thing I know about everyone in this room, every one of you, is that you all have pain that probably no one else in the room sees. Am I right? Things that are hard for you. I should have certain things, but I don't, right? Don't I deserve to have good things and I don't? Some of you may feel cheated, betrayed, robbed. Why? Let me ask you a question. Has anybody here ever done a home renovation? Raise your hand if you've done it. I see a hand or two here. How many people here have had to knock down a wall? Okay, I see a few. Was it easy? No. What was that? Okay, it was actually easy. Okay, yes. Depends on the tools that you used. Okay. So have you ever had a house that was broken? Have you ever had a broken toilet? There's a story that I shouldn't tell. Should I tell it? I'm going to tell a story I probably shouldn't tell, but I'm going to tell it. There was some people at a singles party, and there was a bathroom upstairs, and there was a line for the bathroom. And this one particular person that I've understood, she went to the bathroom, and the toilet wouldn't flush. Now that normally would be kind of embarrassing, but the problem is there was a lot of people in line for the bathroom. What do you do when the toilet doesn't flush and there's people behind you? Any ideas? What's that? Tell the next person? Say it's not flushing. Find a plunger. It's probably a good idea. I'm not sure if I want to tell the end of the story, so I may not. We'll leave it there. But let me tell you what happened here. To erase this board, give me just a second. So in life we have what are called expectations, okay? So we expect that when we flush the toilet handle, it's going to work, right? This is expectations. Here's the problem. A lot of times, reality comes in less than that. So we have reality down here. So here's what I expect, and here's what's really happening. Do you ever feel this way? I expect this, but my life's coming in here. What is the distance between expectations and reality called? Anybody? Living in your head. Thank you. Who else? Yes. Disappointment. Tell me your name. Sue. Thank you. Tell me your name. Annette said, live in your head, Sue. By the way, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tell you. When I was young, they used to give us candy in class. And I thought, why don't they do that anymore? So I'm going to just do that right now. Here's some candy. By the way, can you tell I'm trying to reward participation here? There you go. Thank you. So I'm going to call, I like what you said. I like what both of you said. I'm going to call it something else, but it's really close to what you both said. I'm going to call it frustration. So I expect something and life comes in lower, so I'm frustrated. Well, what happens if my expectations go up and my reality goes down? What happens to this frustration? It increases, it gets bigger. So now I'm more frustrated because I expect more and I'm getting less. Here's the interesting thing. They can use this model to trace wars, divorces. But here's the thing. There's a cure to this model, but I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. Isn't that horrible of me? I'm not going to tell you what it is. And in fact, I got to tell you, the Fireside is going to get a lot worse from here. In fact, it's going to be absolutely awful. So you're welcome to leave if you'd like, okay? Let's talk about this. Before we go and figure out what this is, let's talk about a few things. Today we need to talk about principles. Now, before we get into principles, I want to ask, what is a principle? Any ideas? By the way, I have candy. Moral guideline to live by. Tell me your name. David. By the way, the cord's not this long. Would you be a messenger for me if I need to give people candy in the back there? You're not excluded back there because I've got a messenger here maybe. Will that work? Thank you. What is a principle? I like what you said. You said a moral guideline? I like that. Thank you. Any other ideas? Yes? A rule or something that works a certain way if you live by it. Thank you. Tell me your name. Debbie, thank you. Yes? A standard that you keep. Give her candy, please. Thank you. Okay, these are all great, and I'm going to just 1 second here. I got to tell you, I don't use a PowerPoint on purpose because I really, really like to get dust all over my suit. But I like to go where people want to go. So let's put this up here. We're going to talk about principles, and we're going to talk about techniques or ways to apply those principles. And let me tell you how I'm going to define principle for the purpose of this class. A principle is something that's bigger than me, it's bigger than you, it's something that's really, really real, and it's there whether you believe it is or not. Let me give you an example. The principle of gravity. Gravity works where I'm at, works where you're at, works at the back of the room. It works on the other side of the earth. In fact, it works in Australia, it works in Asia, Europe, North and South America, North Pole, South Pole, and it works everywhere. In fact, gravity even works out in space. Did you have a comment? Yes. Now, here's the thing. I like what you said. So today I'm going to define it as a principle, but you could define it as a law. I like that. I'm going to use the word principle for the moment, but thank you. And maybe my vernacular is wrong, so bear with me. But gravity works here, it works anywhere on the world. In fact, it even works out in space. I mean, gravity is what keeps the moon going around the earth. It keeps the earth going around the sun. Millions and millions of miles away, there are clusters of galaxies held together by gravity. It's everywhere we know of. Now, when you come in contact with any principle, you have a couple of choices. You can either align with it, or you can ignore it. So let's have some fun with this. How could you align with gravity to, say, make you money? What's a technique you could do? And let me give you one idea while you're thinking about it, because I want to hear from you. I was in Vail, Colorado not too long ago, and in Vail, Colorado, what do people do in Vail, Colorado? They ski. Thank you. What's that? You're exactly right. Tell me your name. This guy has a sensible haircut. Can you see this? Chris, right? It's good to see a guy with a sensible haircut, Chris. Thank you. So, Chris, keep rewarding these. We're going to talk about what's happening with the candy here. Thank you, Jim. So, the people in Vail, Colorado, what they've done is they've built ski resorts, and people come from all over the country, all over the state of Colorado, all over the world sometimes, to ski. So here's the principle called gravity. They come to ski, and they go up to the top of the hill, and they ski down, pulled down by gravity, and have this fabulous time skiing in a beautiful place. Okay, so how else can you make money with gravity? Any ideas? Skydiving. Thanks again, Chris. Yes? Airplanes, so defying gravity. Thank you. Tell me your name. Gerald? Okay, perfect. Yes, and then I saw a hand back here as well.
When you go into outer space as an astronaut and you're in the Earth's atmosphere, there is no gravity.
Have you done that?
If you're not in your seatbelt, you can float around in
You're right, and you're held in orbit by gravity, so you don't drift out to the really, really far parts of space, correct? Thank you. Tell me your name. Dennis, thank you. Yes. Weight loss. Thank you. I got to tell you, one time I was teaching this principle in another venue, and somebody said plastic surgery, and I thought, well, never mind, I'm not going to go there. Let me tell you any other days. How can I make money with gravity? I need to be listing these. I like this. We've got skydiving, airplanes, jump rope. Thank you. There's more. I want these people to be reinforced if they're doing it. This is great. We're going to talk about airplanes, trampoline, like a trampoline park. So I could sell tickets to a trampoline park. If I did skydiving, I could get some I could get some parachutes and some good insurance, amusement parks, right? Okay, wow, this is a good group. Yes, zip lines, thank you. Bungee jumping, somebody said, thank you. Who said that? I should have been a doctor. Nobody can read my handwriting. No offense to anybody who's a doctor here, sorry. Weightlifting. Okay? So here's the thing. I bet you we could come up with 100 different things. Here's one. I'll do one more because I just thought of here. What if I were to build a dam across the river and let the water build up, and then the dam could go through the turbines and make electricity? Skydiving. We got that one. Thank you. Dennis, correct? Thank you. So these are great ideas. So here's the thing. When we're talking about principles, and I'm glad you brought this up, the sister over here who talked about laws, the kind of principles we're talking about today are not the kind of principles that sometimes people say, well, I have my principles, and you have your principles, and my principles work for me, and your principles work for you. Those are not the kind of principles we're talking about. In fact, I would probably label those as values, right? The kind of principles we're talking about today are principles that are really, really real, whether you believe they are or not. Can you imagine someone saying, gravity doesn't really work for me? It may work for you. That same person could go to the top of a cliff and say, I believe I can fly, and jump off, and what happens? So here's the point. We can choose to do anything we want in life, in relationships, in our work, families, significant others, boyfriends, girlfriends. But I got to tell you, we do not control the consequences of our action. Did you hear that? We can choose to do anything we want, but we do not control the consequences of our actions. Let me tell you what I mean. If I respect gravity, gravity is a principle, I can't invent it. It's bigger than me, it's bigger than you, it's bigger than all of us. It's all throughout the universe that we know of. If I respect it and align with it, I could build a ski resort. You don't want to put these on the wrong side. I could build ski resort, skydiving, airplanes, trampolines, zip lines, bungee jumping, hydroelectric dam, weightlifting. But what happens if I ignore gravity? What if I'm careless with gravity? It doesn't ignore you. Thank you, Chris. You experience the consequence. You could be injured. You might even die. So look at this. Gravity's here. I can align with it, or I can ignore it to my peril. Does gravity change? No. So what controls the consequences of our actions? Principles do. I get to the top of the cliff. I can bring a hang glider or something that aligns with other principles of aerodynamics. But if I jump off the cliff, I don't get to choose the consequence. The principle does. Now, if I respect it and build a hydroelectric dam or a ski resort or bungee jumping or zip lines or whatever else it is, I might even get really wealthy. Or gravity could kill me. What changes? Does gravity change? No. So there are principles in relationships. There are principles in marriages. There's principles in romantic relationships. There's principles in business. There's principles in life that are just as real as gravity. And they're there whether you believe they are or not. And you have a choice. You can either build an amusement park, I can't remember who said that, or a skydiving business, or you can get killed by it. What's the difference? Whether you respect it and align with it, or you ignore it to your peril. So because these control the consequences of our actions, what are they? What are these principles? And let me give you a hint, they're not the latest book, they're not the latest coaching program, they're not the latest social media something or other. Just like gravity, they're ancient, they're timeless. What are they? Any ideas? Yes? Agency, oh, I like that. Like we have free will. Oh, that's the big one. That's the stuff you can't touch. That's big, thank you. Yes. Because we can choose between aligning and ignoring. What else? Commandments. Truth. Opportunity. Chris says if you use them for your good, you can avoid bad consequences, right? Let me tell you a story about something that happened to me. One time I was at a bank. Thank you, Chris, by the way. Thank you. Thank you for all you participated here. Thank you. Tell me your name. Gary, thank you. I was at a bank once, and I had a problem with my account. And I got to tell you the problem I had with my account. The problem was that I didn't put money in the account when I should have put money in the account. And I went down to the bank, and by the way, my account was really in the red. And I went down to the bank, and I was kind of stressed out about it. I said, hey, I need to get this problem figured out. And this gentleman, we'll call him Jeff, helped me fix this problem. In fact, I put the money in like I should have. He waived a bunch of the fees, which made me happy. And I put some money in like I should have, and so I was back in the black. When he was done, I looked at Jeff, and I said, hey, Jeff, can I get the email to your boss? And he looked at me kind of funny, like, why do you want the email to my boss? Like he was a little bit, this wasn't making him happy. And I said, I'm going to tell him what a great job you did. And Jeff looked at me like, okay. I could tell he was not used to this. I got the email to his boss. I went home that night. I typed up a quick email that said something like this: Dear Mr. Branch Manager, I had the opportunity of working with Jeff. He was very professional and helpful. I think he deserves a raise and a promotion. Okay. I sent it to his boss. I copied it to Jeff. I didn't think anything else about it. Well, here's the interesting thing. I came back to this same bank. I'm standing in line. There's about 10 people in front of me. Somebody comes up to me who I didn't recognize, and they say, Mr. Anderson. I was a little surprised because I was in a fairly big city, and people generally didn't know each other. They said, Mr. Anderson. I said, yes. They said, can I help you with your banking? And I said, well, sure. He said, follow me. He took me from the back of the line and let me do my banking in front of everyone else. You would have thought that I had $10 million in the bank, which we all know that I didn't, right? Well, it was really interesting because it happened again and again at this bank where they would treat me like a king. Why did that happen? Because Jeff got a promotion because I was kind. Yeah, there's a, that may have happened. The answer is I don't know. I don't know what happened. Hold on to that story for just a second. A few years later, I'm sitting in New York. I'm sitting across this desk from a high-level director in New York. By the way, I do sales for work. And some of you are like, well, I don't want to be here anymore. I understand that. But I was sitting across there, and he said, you know what? You're the only sales guy I've ever let into my office. And I was surprised. And then he said something that was really, really interesting to me. He said, and I'm not going to tell you what he said. What do you think I did to get into the sales guy in New York? Any ideas? Candy. How did you guess? Yes. I wouldn't tell. You know what? The job of a good speaker is to never end the story. And I'm going to torture you by never letting the story end. Actually, I will get back. And if I don't, will you remind me? No? Okay. Somebody remind me if I don't end the stories. So here's the thing. I'll tell you what I did. I actually sent an email to him. Guess what happened? He ignored it. Any of you in sales realize you get ignored quite a bit. I called in to see if I could talk to him, and the secretary answered the phone, and I said, hey, can I speak to Bob? And she said, he's unavailable. And then I said, okay, well, I sent an email last week. Maybe what I could do is just resend that email and copy it to you. Would that be okay? She said, sure. And then I noticed that she was really friendly. She had the kind of this bubbly voice that was just friendly, and she was just kind. And I said, you know what, I'm on the phone all day long. Thanks so much for being so friendly and courteous. It's refreshing. And she said, well, sure, thanks. And then I said, you know what, I'm going to mention that to your boss. And I pulled up the email I'd sent a week ago, and I said, dear Bob, had the opportunity of speaking with Janice. She was very professional and helpful. I think she's an asset to your team. By the way, I'm going to be in New York on these days. And that was it. I sent the email, and I said, hey, did the email come through? And she said, let me check. And she said, yeah, it did come through. And then there was another little pause, and she said, hey, thanks for the compliment. And I said, I meant it. Thank you. Well, that was it. Fast forward, I'm back in this high-level director's office in New York, and he goes, you're the only salesperson I've let in. And the thing he said next was really surprising to me. He said, the reason you're here is because you were nice to my secretary. I talk to my secretary more than I talk to my wife. Now, here's my question for you. If there's one thing that I want you to do differently because you came to this class today, I want you to start thinking, what are the principles that are really, really real that govern everything? What are they? I heard kindness. And then the next question would be, how can I align with them? So I'm going to erase the board. Give me 1 second here. By the way, we had gravity here, and then over here we had ski resorts, and I should have written all the techniques over here, but I made a mistake and wrote them over here. Okay, so but gravity's over here. We have ski resorts, hydroelectric dams. Let's go backwards. See if I can find the right chalk piece here. Sincerely complimenting somebody, someone to their boss. That was the thing that I did. It's like building a ski resort, right? And hopefully I aligned with something. What was the timeless ancient principle that's as real as gravity that I aligned with? Any ideas? Kindness. Karma. And I like these. You're all right. I'm going to call it something different, but kindness and karma are right. I'm going to call it the golden rule.
How about compassion? Ron Roberts.
I like that. Compassion and what?
Ron Roberts.
Ron Roberts. Awesome. Thank you, Ron. Compassion, I like that. So compassion, the golden rule, kindness, karma, yes? Do you want to come up here and teach this class? That was awesome. Thank you. Exactly this. You know what's interesting? What you send out comes back to you. Thank you. So, you know, when I was in college, I studied psychology, and I can tell you what a psychologist would say that I did. They would say, you did positive reinforcement. Does anybody know what positive reinforcement is? Candy. That's the second time you've said candy. Thank you. And actually, you're right. Would you please give her 2 candies? Because I don't think she got reinforced on the first one. You're right, it's exactly right. When people do something, she's right there. Make sure she gets the candy, please. When somebody does something you want, like participate in a fireside, you reward them. You get candy. Yes?
Even with verbal candy as well, because you thank people for their comments and, oh, I like that, that's really good, and so that's verbal candy.
Thank you. I really like that. That's really good. Seriously, thank you. She said that I give verbal candy, which you're right, I actually do try to do that. So what happens is behaviors are like seeds. If you can imagine, if you have behaviors anywhere, and attention is like water, and I wish I had a little pitcher of water, but imagine I have a pitcher of water in my hand. I'm going to water the behaviors that I want to see grow with attention, okay? So when you say candy, I want a lot of attention because I really like that answer. When you say all these scriptures and these great comments, compassion, I want to do that. But here's the thing. Have you ever seen a parent, the kid walks in, and the parent says, I can't believe you stayed out till 3 o'clock in the morning last night, and you didn't make your bed, and you're hanging out with the wrong kids, and you're playing too many video games. What is that parent doing? What's that? They're watering the seeds they don't want to see grow. So what happens is they're giving attention to the behaviors they don't want to see grow. Guess what? Guess what they found? Even though they're thinking they're getting rid of the behaviors, they're actually watering them with attention. Isn't that interesting? Now, so for any of you who are psychologists, I apologize for what I'm about to say. Sometimes psychologists make things more complicated than they are, but I'm going to say that here. Positive reinforcement. I think positive reinforcement is really just a spin-off of the golden rule. You know what Jesus Christ said? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And then he said something like this, on this hang all the law and the prophets. Treating people like you want to be treated is like gravity. You can align with it or you can ignore it. Now, what does this have to do with anything? Let's back up for a second. Let's say that I ignored the golden rule when I was at the bank. What if I went into the bank and I said, I can't believe you guys charged me so many fees. I mean, I make one mistake and you guys messed it up. And gosh, waive the fees now. And if you don't, then I'm going to take my business elsewhere and tell everybody what a bad bank you are. Could I have gotten them to waive the fees for me? You know what? I might have. They might have done it. But what would happen when I came back to the bank a week later? Watch out for that guy. He's a little bit of a time bomb. And by the way, make him wait a little bit longer because he's a little bit of a jerk, right? You can ignore a principle, and you might get a short-term result, but in the long term, I don't know, for lack of a better word, you're hosed. I don't know if you can say that. It's not a good idea. Okay. Now, here's the thing. Let's go back to what we were talking about at the beginning. We expect something in life. And life, like C.S. Lewis, hurts abominably and does not seem to make sense. But I've done everything right. I pay my tithing, I go to church. Why is my life painful? Why do I feel betrayed? Why do I feel that life is unfair? Here's something to think about, something to consider. What if, let's write it up here again. I have expectations here, and I have reality here. There's a lot of things about reality I can't control. You know that? I can't control the weather. I can't control what's happening on other continents. I can't control other people. I can influence them. What if I were to just bring my expectations down to reality? I talked to a renowned therapist, and he said, you know what, if people could learn to expect reality, they would be less frustrated. Now that's hard because I tell people this sometimes and they say, yeah, but then am I settling? No, you're expecting reality. Now, here's the key. What if for everyone you meet, instead of expecting them to be something they're not. Just expect reality. You can see it pretty quickly. But then, what if you could flip these lines in their life with them? Let me tell you what I mean. What if I could make their reality better than they expect? So instead of expectations on top and reality down here, what if I could make reality better than they expect? What happens is, what is that now? Instead of being frustration, what is it now? Who said delight? Chris. I'm telling you, guys with good haircuts like Chris, smart guys. I mean, they know how to cut, yeah. So delight, that's exactly right. Give that man a candy, please. Okay, so delight. Let me tell you how this works. At the bank, I think this is what happened with Jeff at the bank. Jeff at the bank handles people all day long, but somehow at the end of his day, and by the way, I'm not a genius at this, I just kind of stumbled into it. He had a compliment about him to his boss, and I think that's what got me treated like a king of the bank. Same in New York. You know, Janice answers the phone in New York all day long, but at the end of this, she had a compliment about her. What if you could be the kind of person who is consistently exceeding someone's expectations? Let me tell you what happens. People feel delight. And not only does it align with the golden rule, doing this kind of puts the golden rule on hyperdrive. It makes it powerful. Let me give you one more example. My wife, by the way, I gotta tell you, and just so you know, I've been divorced twice. I know what it feels like to be lonely. I know what it feels like to feel like I should have something and not have it. Right now, I'm currently married to a wonderful woman, and sometimes she expects things of me, and the reality that I give her makes her frustrated. Imagine that. But one time I got it right. I'm going to tell you one time I got it right. One time, my wife was telling me, she said, you know, I really miss my parents. And I decided I was going to try to make her reality a little bit better than we expect. So I went and bought a plane ticket without telling her, and I packed a bag, had my oldest daughter help me do it. And we were going downtown to see the lights down in Salt Lake City, Utah. And we were following some of the extended family. And I didn't tell her that I had a plane ticket, and I didn't tell her that I had a bag packed for her. And we're driving down. She thinks we're going to go see the lights downtown. And it was perfect timing, because about 3 miles before this, she said, you know, I'm really missing my parents. And I thought, wow, this is perfect timing. And so we got to this place, that, you know, the place on 215 on the west side there where you can go downtown or you can either go to the airport. Well, we get to that place, and I turn towards the airport, and she looks over at me and she says, you missed the turn. And I said, you said you want to go see your parents. And she goes, whatever. She thought I was just popping off. She thought I was making. When we drive to the airport, I get there, I pull out this little ticket to Southern California where her parents live, and I said, hey, enjoy your flight. Here's a bag. And she just looked at me, she said, is this real? Is this real? And I said, yeah, go have fun. I'm going to take the kid. You know, I got to tell you, that was the best thing I ever did for that relationship. Let me ask you this. When we start expecting reality, even though, let me quote, it does not seem to make sense that things should be so hard, and we get comfortable with things being hard, they actually get easier, because we're not running around saying we've been robbed. And then, like Chris said, there's a scripture here. Actually, it was somebody else who said this. It was where's Robert? Robert. Thank you, Robert. I'm going to read a scripture that's very close to what you quote. This is Jesus himself, who, by the way, is the principal giver. He said, give, and it shall be given unto you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. Men shall give into your bosom. For with the same measure that ye meet withal, it shall be measured to you again. If we can make our little decisions where we're constantly trying to make people's reality better than they expect, is it possible that things might turn out differently than we think? By the way, this is kind of fun. I'm going to challenge you to do it right now. I want you to turn to someone you don't know, and I want you to say something. You got to stay seated. Say something that's sincere and positive. Positively reinforce them. You've got 30 seconds. Go. You can't know them. Go ahead. Okay, good. To some of you, perfect. Now, some of you may not realize, well, let me tell you a story, one more story. I have a friend named Daniel, and Daniel was recently accepted to Stanford's MBA program. Has anybody ever gone to Stanford here? Let me tell you this. Stanford, he was recently accepted to Stanford's MBA program, which is kind of a big deal. Does anybody know what an average Stanford MBA makes 5 years after they graduate? Any ideas? 300,000 or 400,000. I think you're right. When I looked this up a while ago, and this was pre-inflation, it was $285,000 a year. By the way, this is not about money. This is to illustrate a point. I'll get back to it. Okay, so I looked it up and I found out what the average household in America makes. It was around $55,000 when I looked this up. That's a difference of $230,000. If you make $230,000 more than the next person, you do it for 30 years. What is that number? 6.9 million. You did that in your head? Oh, you're good at math. Wow, good for you. 6.9 million. So here's the thing. This math is really simple, but because Daniel went to Stanford, there's a good chance that he'll make $6.9 million more than the next person. Here's why this number's wrong. It's actually low. It only takes into account that in year 5, he'd make this much money. In year 6 and 7 and 8 and 10, they generally make more. There's no inflation calculated into your cost of living. So this number really could be much more, 20 or 30 million, depending on what kind of inflation rate you use. I went to Daniel and I said, Daniel, what did you do to get accepted to Stanford? Guess what he said to me? He said, my dad told me I had to look stuff up in the dictionary. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, my dad told me if I didn't understand something, I had to look it up. I'm thinking to myself, $6.9 million, look stuff up in the dictionary, tell me more. And he goes, well, I'd be reading a book for school and I wouldn't understand a word, and so I'd have to look it up. He goes, it was really interesting because I then learned the word for the assignment. He goes, what was the real magic is I'd hear this word in conversation or on TV or on the radio, and all of a sudden I knew what they were talking about, and I said, well, that makes more sense. That makes a little more sense. But I'm still thinking to myself, $6.9 million, look stuff up. Was there anything else you did? And he goes, yeah, I mean, sometimes I had to look stuff up in the encyclopedia. That was it. Well, I went home and I thought about this for like a few years, because I'm a slow learner, okay? A few years later, I came back to Daniel and I go, hey, Daniel, how much time a day did you spend looking stuff up in the dictionary? And he goes, it wasn't very long, 5-10 minutes. I said, really? He said, maybe 15. I said, what was on a really bad day? He goes, maybe a half hour. And I said, okay. And I went home and I did some math, and I added up a half hour for every day he was in junior high, high school, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, all the way through middle school, high school, college. And I added up a half an hour for each day, and I divided it into $6.9 million. Does anybody here have any idea how much Daniel was making per hour as, say, a third grader looking stuff up in the dictionary? Anybody, any ideas? $300 an hour? More. I don't have time to do the math because I'm running low here, but he was making at least $2,200 an hour. Now, that's worst case scenario because I'm using 6.9, which we know doesn't have inflation calculated into it, and I'm also using the 30 minutes a day. If I use 5 minutes, like he said, this number goes up by 6 times, $13,000 an hour. Does that surprise you? Why would I tell you that story? What's that? Sell encyclopedias? What was that? I should sell encyclopedias. You're right, I'm in sales. Why don't I do that? Right? Thank you. I told you this. Let me tell you why I told you this. You may not think that your little decisions matter. But I'm here to tell you your little decisions are everything. Like if I say to you, hey, you should look stuff up in the dictionary, most of you would say, okay, that makes sense, sure. But you may not realize how much sense it makes, right? What's that? Yeah, it's even easier now. Yeah, well now you can look it up on Google. It's even easier. There's no excuse now, right? But here's the thing. If I tell you that today, maybe just every day, you should catch somebody doing something right instead of being negative. Just catch somebody doing something right. You might say, well, that makes sense. But you may not realize how much sense it makes, right? There was a boy who was being sent to the principal's office all day long. And what would happen is he'd get to it was such a big deal that the principal was called in to see what was going on with this boy. And this counselor sat in the back, and she listened, saw, and she's noticed that this boy was doing a lot of stuff right, but getting zero attention for it. As soon as he'd do something wrong, the teacher would say, oop, there you go again. She'd put his name on the board and give him a check mark and another check mark after he kept doing stuff wrong. And eventually he had enough check marks to go down to the principal's office. Well, when he got to the principal's office, the principal said, I knew you'd be here again. And she sat him next to this doorway, this window, and the lunch bell rang. And all of these kids came by and started waving to him. So he was kind of the cool bad kid. And he was saying hi, and they're saying hi. And the counselor's just watching this, and she said, you know what? This is completely predictable behavior. This boy is getting a ton of attention for doing stuff wrong and zero attention for doing stuff right. This is why he's behaving. If you can catch people doing something right, things will change. Now, what are the little tiny things that you know you should be doing, but that you're not doing? Here's my next question. Why aren't you doing them? Yes. Right. I could be better at that too. And you don't need to tell me exactly what they are, though I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. Let me guess why you're not doing them. Can I give you a guess? There's stuff we all know we need to do, but we're not doing it, and it's because we don't feel like it. I just don't feel like it. I did that one time, and it did not turn out well. I don't feel like doing that again. Let me tell you one story. There was Stephen Covey. He was at a conference once, and somebody came up to him after the conference and said this. They said, I don't love my wife anymore. And Stephen Covey looked at the guy and said, well, then love her. He goes, I don't. I've fallen out of love. She's fallen out of love with me. We're probably heading for a divorce. And he looked at the guy and said, well, if you're not feeling it, that would be a good reason to love her. And the guy said, how do you love somebody you don't love? And Stephen Covey looked at the guy and said, my friend, you're acting like love is a feeling. Love isn't a feeling. Love is a verb. It's an action word. It's something you do. But here's the kicker. If you do the verb, the feeling will follow. Did you hear that? And we get this backwards in our society. In our society, we're taught whatever you feel, you should just do. But here's the bad news. Have you ever noticed that your feelings are just like the weather? You're embarrassed one minute, and then you're angry, and then you're happy again. And if you make all your decisions based on your feeling of the moment, you'll have fickle results. Perhaps another option, consider this option, instead of making your decisions based on your feelings, perhaps be humble enough to realize you're not a principle, you're not gravity. Figure out what those principles are. If you need some hints, read Jesus' words in Matthew 5 through 7. Matthew 5 through 7. And then make your little tiny daily decisions like Daniel align with those principles. And when you do that, life changes. It gets fun. Let me just give you one example. My wife and I were at this restaurant. I try to do what I tell you guys to do to try to make people's expectations a little bit better. And there was this waitress who came up and she was laughing with us, and I thought, that's a behavior I like to see. Let's reinforce it. I didn't have any candy, sorry. So I said, hey, get your boss over here. And the boss came over and I said, you know what, I would come to this restaurant just for this waitress. She was super professional, super helpful. And I would drive here just because of her. She's been making us laugh. She's been really fun. And would you please take care of her? And he said, I will. And she was there while I said it to him. Well, we sat back down at the table, and this waitress comes back up to me, and she has tears in her eyes, and she says, you're the best table I've ever waited. And she was trying not to cry. One thing I know about each of you, and I said this at the beginning, each one of you has some sort of pain that no one else here knows about, a struggle, a battle. I have them, and I'm going to just demonstrate with myself about a battle that you wouldn't know about me. You probably wouldn't guess. My daughter Cheyenne was a beautiful angel baby. She had really soft, dark hair. She had deep brown eyes. And she was really, really calm. Really calm. In fact, sometimes she was so calm I had to stop what I was doing and just look into her eyes. And she would look back at me, almost like she was searching for something. I had to stop what I was doing a lot of times and just stare and look at her. We just kind of lock eyes together. And she would just have this calm, like she was searching for something in my eyes. Fast forward, I'm sitting on the side of the road. I get a phone call from a stranger. The stranger says, I pick up the phone. I say, hello. And they said, is this EksAyn Anderson? I said, yes. They said, your daughter has drowned. You need to come to the hospital. And I said, what? And they said, your daughter has drowned. You need to come to the hospital. I don't remember how that conversation ended. Somehow I drove to the hospital. Somehow I parked. Somehow I walked in. And I saw my little baby girl, 9 months old, on a hospital bed. And she had tubes coming out of her nose. And that wasn't the first time I'd seen someone I love with tubes coming out of their nose. As I walked into that hospital room, I heard someone in the background say the words brain dead. And that wasn't the first time I'd heard someone say those words. I went up to my daughter. I put my hand on her shoulder, kind of like this. By the way, I got to tell you, there were a lot of people in that room who were not calm. But I put my hand on her shoulder. And right when I touched her arm, I felt calm. Almost like she was looking up at me calm. I went over to one of the EMTs and I said, "What's going to happen to my daughter? I'm a big boy, I want to know." And he looked at me and he said, "I think she's going to make a really good donor." Eventually, they slowly wheeled my daughter out to a life flight jet. I got in the jet, flying over the Utah desert. And for a brief moment, I could feel the darkness coming into that jet. I could feel. And I said, "Heavenly Father, please, please help me not to become bitter. Please help me." And I wasn't, since that prayer, I could see them respirating my daughter. That wasn't the first time I'd seen someone needing help with this little respiration bulb. The plane landed. We went up to Primary Children's Hospital. They said it doesn't look very good after a while. And for the second time in my life, I got to see someone I love being taken off of life support. And they brought my daughter to me and put her in my arms like this. And I just held her. She could breathe a little bit, but I just held her until she stopped breathing. She had a little bit of brainstem functioning, not much, but I just held her. Everyone you meet, yourselves included, has pain that you can't see. And if you'll find a way to align with the golden rule like we had up here and surprise them with good things, you'll be surprised how things change. And the little things, by just doing that consistently, might make more of a difference than you think. Will you do that today? Will you go home today and find someone who needs a boost and make their reality just a little bit better than they expect? Will you do that today? It could be anybody. You could be at the drive-thru. You could say, "Hey, how much is the person behind me? What are they paying?" And as long as it's not $100, let's say it's like $8 or something, you could pay for their thing, right? Maybe that person you're dating or person who's giving you a hard time, you can make their reality just a little better than they expect. One thing I want to tell you here, for those of you who are hurting, which I know is all of you in some way, will you remember that He is building you into a palace, and He intends to come and live it in Himself. The story's not over. But will you remember that? I believe that you will. I believe that you will. Thank you for coming. By the way, there's a bunch of candy up here. I want to reinforce every one of you for coming. So I bought a bunch of candy. If it doesn't run out, thank you for coming. Have a great night tonight.
Thank you. Our closing hymn is More Holiest Give Me. And Steve Bundy will be giving our closing prayer. For those that are new, are relatively new to coming out to our activities, if you'd meet me over here, I'd just like to kind of meet with you and help you understand the transition to coming into singles, which usually associated with a lot of trauma and pain. And if you meet with me, I'm sure I can meet your expectation because they're probably pretty low. So we'll proceed. Thank you.
Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we are thankful for the opportunity and privilege we've had of being here this evening. And we're thankful for Brother Anderson, for the principles that he has taught us about. And we're thankful for the Spirit that we have filled in this meeting. We pray that thy Spirit may continue with us as we socialize and mingle together. We're so thankful, Father, for the gospel, for the strength and the guidance that thou gives us. We love thee and acknowledge thy hand in all things. These things we say and do so in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.